Hey folks, it's time to discuss Zenless Zone Zero's perfect character Twiggy, and why she should be playable. Let's talk about 1.7, the first patch after her official debut, and its story events in relation to Twiggy, and what they could mean for her potential return. Keep in mind, since I will be going over the story, spoiler warning, we will be covering everything until the end of Bury Your Tears with the Past Part 2, so everything up until the end of 1.7. In terms of setup, 1.7 was actually kind of a huge chapter. We saw new characters, story events, and abilities that could all relate to Twiggy eventually making a return. Let's start out with the character most people would probably associate with her, Dina, the daughter of an exorcist doctor who experimented with sacrifices, Landon. Dina is pretty much a mirror to Twiggy in terms of being focused on a specific goal and not being able to let go. The one big difference between the two is that Dina had multiple people willing to help her, such as Camille, another character that was introduced, and Vivian, while Twiggy was rejected from the one person she still looked up to, Anby. We learn more about everyone's past and how Dina decided to continue Landon's experiments after he was killed. This was potentially also the serum Twiggy injected herself with, and I kind of find it interesting how it's very consistent. Meaning sometimes the sacrifices would be created, sometimes those sacrifices wouldn't actually be made and the people would just turn into ethereals. We still don't know what exactly the differentiation is. I think all of the experiments could be counted on some kind of a spectrum where it's not just ethereal or sacrifice, but also something in between. For example, during the climax of the story of 1.7, when Dina transforms herself into an ethereal, she completely lost all of her personality and just turned into an ethereal, while Twiggy retained it, as seen in the end of the Anby agent story when she addressed Hareen and Anby in Twiggy's final moments. Something that I also thought was interesting at first is the fact that in the comic artwork, when Dina transforms, they actually focused on Dina's face and how it transformed into an ethereal core, while Twiggy and A actually kept their faces intact, completely unlike any other ethereals we've ever seen before. I originally thought that Pellicus in general didn't have a core, but after rewatching the gameplay and the cutscene when Twiggy teleports herself behind Anby, you can see that the Pellicus twins actually do have cores, which is kind of unfortunate, but the main difference is that unlike Dina and Silver, their core is at their heart and can only be seen from the back. I'm not sure if this has any significance, but the fact that they keep as much of their human aspect as possible gives me some kind of hope that we can eventually heal them and bring them back. We also get a story continuation of Hartman, who lost his contact with Tops, but since 2.0 will cover Exaltists and such, I hope he will, come back and finally face retribution for his actions. On our mission to find the sacrifices with Vivian, Hugo, Lycon, and Anby, we get a small line of dialogue where Hartman talks to Anby, like literally shit-talking my wife, like absolutely crazy. Granted, this was in 1.6. A member of the Twiggy Discord server, Smoke, also brought up a very interesting point about the exchange between Hartman and Anby overall. Up until that point, Anby had no idea who Twiggy had been working with, so Hartman outright taunting her with her sister's death and Anby not doing anything felt incredibly weird. Remember, back when it was her own sister, Anby immediately went into the offensive and became confrontational against Twiggy. Now with Hartman, someone she already doesn't like, being in front of her and directly confirming that he is responsible for everything. Being responsible for her sister's death, essentially. That's when she goes silent and returns to her own passive self. This felt really, really weird, considering that before, if you remember the Victoria housekeeping introduction, like even in a similar situation, she was essentially ready to go and ready to attack, right? I get that she'd feel sad because she got hit by a traumatic memory, but let's be real here, right? Kill Hartman right then and there, honestly. But I do hope that this is something that, even though this seemed like kind of like a throwaway line back then, this is something that they'll, pick up again in the future when Hartman is around. But we do see Hartman again in 1.7 and the rest of the Ravenlock family, where we infiltrate their manor and get to see the credibility of Ravenlock. The entire family kind of get destroyed because of Hugo exposing the hidden affairs, after which Tops is like, no way, Jose, we're distancing ourselves from Ravenlock from now on. It's important to note that no one actually died in that sequence. Hartman is still alive and still able to show up as an antagonist, which makes me kind of hopeful that he'll show up again and, just get hopefully, killed by Twiggy in an ideal world, that is. Since I do like the irony of a character, Hartman Ravenlock, someone who uses his wealth to further his influence and his control over others, using people beneath him as pawns, just to get killed by one of those of what he thought, expendable pawns that he controlled. Just as we saw how Hartman tried to recruit workers, just to use them as sacrifice material, not caring about the actual people and just, being willing to pay off the costs. Or how when he talked to Twiggy, like, you've been diligent, little Twiggy, and as you know, your research is crucial. You're just like me. Trying to feign compassion and understanding when in reality he really doesn't give a shit, right? Like, he never saw Twiggy as a partner, just as a tool he could use. And I do hope that eventually he'll end up paying for this. Like, imagine if Hartman was like a complete 180 of his actual character, fixed Twiggy up, got her therapy and so on, right? Like, if Twiggy truly ends up killing him, which would be peak cinema, he could have prevented his own death, so to speak. So I think this outcome would be amazing, probably just wishful thinking, but as you know, the hopium is everlasting. Moving on, of course, the main driver for the Twiggy revival theory in 1.7 is the corruption healing from Phaethon, and how they healed Vivian from the corruption caused by the serum she injected herself with to fight Dina. Granted, this was the one thing that happened in the end of the story, and similar to Bell and Wise surviving Bringer's point-blank explosion back in 1.4, this isn't something that was ever explained. As of now at least, and I'm hoping one day everything will kind of lead towards a big explanation, kind of like all of the different paths converging, but as of now this is just something we kind of have to take for granted and accept. But I'm hoping that down the line, when the twins explore their abilities, the healing ability will enhance from something that, only healed an ongoing corruption, like how Vivian only had the starting signs, similar to Harumasa's agent story, where we saw, I think, like some of the veins showing the corruption, all the way to actually healing a full ethereal. Of course, they kind of have to explain it, since because of like how the gacha game Zenless is structured, the ethereals will always be around, because, who would the enemies be otherwise, right? But I think it could be limited maybe to the artificial serums that cause the corruption, which, incidentally includes both Vivian and Twiggy. So maybe this is something that could maybe even happen. The events with Twiggy occurred before the twins got the healing ability, but considering that as of 2.0 the siblings will train and hone their abilities, healing Twiggy from the corruption is something that might even be possible, since they left kind of like left enough of a window open, by Anby not, being confirmed to have destroyed the facility, and Twiggy kind of being connected with Hartman, Tops, and the Exaltists. I don't know the lore and the gameplay, I don't know how they're connected overall, but since the database entry of Twiggy and A, aka Palicus, covers the dialogue between two Hollow Raiders and the fact that they're around doing Shio defense, where we're canonically, protecting the Shio pillars, Palicus seems to, still be around. So there would technically be nothing against us finding our way back to the laboratory, encountering Palicus and reversing the corruption, potentially after we've been trained in our abilities as Phaethon, and have a need to get more info from Twiggy, for example, where, after all, she had made deals with Hartman and the other Exaltists after all. So me, personally, it wouldn't be too far-fetched. However, I'm a bit fearful regarding the story quality, considering what happened with Dina and Camille, and how the story kind of like ended. Because I feel like the characters should have been around for a lot longer and should have gotten more possibilities for getting fleshed out, but then they just didn't and got killed off without like any rhyme or reason, really. It would have been so simple to still have them around because of the premise in general is very interesting, right? Like the remaining victims of a cult, you know, with Dina still being committed to it because she doesn't see a way out of it, and Camille already being past it, but wanting to help Dina get out as well, right? Because, you know, maybe she feels like guilty for killing Landon. Granted, you know, self-defense, but you know, like, why would they not have recurring antagonists, especially, you know, considering that 2.0 will dive more into Exaltists story-wise. It always feels like whenever new story parts come out, it's always like meant for teasing the next update. It's never focusing on the story that's right there, right now, but always focusing on the, oh, look out, the next update will be amazing, the next one, but it's never this one, right? Then again, I don't wish to doom post too much because I genuinely love the concept of Zenless and the story of the characters and everything in general, right? The past 2 patches were epilogue patches, during one of which Twiggy was a character, so it's, you know, obviously not the absolute worst, right? Especially during 1.6, the 2 agent stories, they were genuinely amazing. It's just unfortunate that things don't seem to be planned out long term. But I seriously hope I'm wrong and they end up bringing everything together. I'm staying hopeful. I can't wait for the story of 2.0, and I will be making another video for, you know, each of the chapters until, you know, our wife truly becomes playable. If you're interested in Twiggy, consider joining the Twiggy Mains Discord server. There probably aren't many of us out there, so we have to stick together, right? There's also a subreddit r/TwiggyMains if you'd like to see more fan art, memes, and thoughtful discussions about our favorite character. I'd like to give a huge shout out to the Twitter account @TimelyTwiggy for the Twiggy footage that you've seen throughout the entire video. Thank you so much. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to Streetwise Rhapsody for allowing me to use their Zenless story playthrough as footage. It really helped me out and was extremely kind of them. I've linked their channel below in the description, make sure to give them a watch. See you then, let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, I wish you an awesome day.